Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first MTA Board meeting of the new year. Mr. Morello, are there any public speakers?
There are, Mr. Chairman. There are four. I would ask the speakers to confine their remarks to around the 2 minutes that are allocated for each. When you hear the tone and see the lights blinking, you'll know that you're running out of time and should wrap up. Our first speaker is Anthony Simon. He'll be followed by James Snyder.
Good morning, Chairman Prendergast and board members. My name is Anthony Simon. I am the General Chairman of the Sheet Metal Air, Rail, and Transportation Union on the Long Island Railroad. Thank you for providing me with this opportunity to speak this morning, and I stand before you today with the hope to convey a strong message that will end the overwhelming concerns of a potential strike looming on the Long Island Railroad. I negotiated a successful agreement our last round of negotiations. I am confident we can achieve the same success once the MTA accepts PEB 244, and I see no reason why this should not happen. I am the spokesperson for the Coalition of Long Island Railroad Unions, which also includes the TCU, IAM, NCFOs, SCIU, and the Smart Sheet Metal Division. We are 70% of the unionized workforce on the Long Island Railroad. I'm certain you have all been made aware through various print and media avenues that labor and management are in an extremely fragile state on the Long Island Railroad. I understand there are struggles throughout the agency between labor and management, and I support our brothers and sisters throughout the MTA family, and I thank our brother John Samuelson, president of the TWU, and his members for their support. I would like to take this moment to share with you some of the important facts that represent the contract dispute. Over the last 3 to 4 years, labor has not had any consistency in leadership to negotiate with. We are all aware that we have had CEOs that chose to move on to bigger and better things. Some may be bigger, but not necessarily better. Because of these choices, labor was left to negotiate with the MTA staff. It was clear from the start that the agency did not take negotiations seriously and were not prepared at all. Through all this, labor was focused and prepared from the start. There never seemed to be any thought or consideration from the agency. It was 3 net zeros, along with pension and health care concessions, take it or leave it. And as we went through the motions of the negotiations, the countless reasons stemming from politics to poor priorities, we got nowhere in the process. Let it be known that during all of these failed, non-productive talks, our labor workforce delivered throughout the years, time in and time again, storm after storm, mishap after mishap. MTA and the Long Island Railroad workers delivered. We built and restored service, all while receiving 0 wage increases. And yet, while labor received absolutely nothing for their hard work, the agency continued to convey messages that management shared the pain by receiving zeros as well. But as it turns out, that didn't seem to be the case. The appointed board, PEB 244, determined that there were, in fact, management raises. It appears that creativity was used in order to provide for these raises, things such as productivity and added responsibilities. The board saw right through this. While labor continued to work diligently under expired contracts, it became very clear that the only thing left to do was to resort to the Railway Labor Act for the ongoing dispute. Mediation, National Mediation Board, the ultimate release, and now we're here at the Presidential Emergency Board. The MTA is unable to willingly deliver an offer to its employees, and labor is not willing to accept the agreement of offers, wage freezes, and givebacks that are consistent with the commuter rail industry. Then there is a process that both parties will hopefully be able to live by, and this process accepting the PEB recommendations that have been presented to us. At this time, both sides have spent countless hours and valuable resources preparing their cases to deliver to a non-biased board of experts who have the ability to make recommendations and can settle this dispute. In December, with the cooperation of both sides, the process took place, and the recommendations of the PEB 244 with the supporting details were published.
Could you wrap up, please, Mr. Simon?
While the results of the PEB 244 were not everything labor hoped for, we couldn't lose sight of the obligation we have to the riding public. While the recommendations do include modest wage increases, they also open the door to health care contributions, which are historic and sensitive issues on our commuter rail, and a great step for the agency for health care funding. The reality, Mr. Chairman, if you just give me 1 more minute to close up, I would really appreciate that. It's important. The reality now is our labor organization on the Long Island Railroad are prepared to make these recommendations work and are ready to obtain ratification from our respective memberships. We do not want to exercise our legal right to strike. However, we are in disbelief that the MTA is not accepting these. To date, the MTA has not requested a second PEB, which is the next painful step in the process. What this means is March 21st, Labor has the legal right to strike. These tactics, which are being utilized by the agency, are causing tremendous concerns to all parties, especially our riders. Additionally, the MTA makes statements they don't negotiate in the press, but yet that is completely false. It just does it through the back doors and through the newspapers, continuously mentioning how if we do not achieve net zeros and raises must be provided, then the increases will drastically will arise through the fares. It is very obvious that the negotiations through the press are being put into the press, and our frontline employees are being put at risk every day due to these public comments about raises that will cause higher fares. I find it quite disturbing and completely irresponsible on the agency to turn the public against the unions. The MTA finds what they need to find for their public and politically motivated projects. And while the MTA does in fact try to negotiate through the press, they do not negotiate with the unions involved. Since this recommendation, we have not met with the MTA once. Also, I would like to congratulate the MTA PBA on their well-deserved agreement that does not include net 3 zeros. The MTA had the ability to provide raises to the PBA, but from our point of view, this continues to be a tough thing to swallow when they claim they cannot pay the remaining workforce. As General Chairman of the largest organization and spokesman for our coalition, I cannot express the disappointment we feel towards the agency. We as labor leaders made a commitment on behalf of our respected memberships, and the commitment was to 285,000 daily commuters. Our main goal, day after day, is to get them to the destination safely, no matter what obstacles we may encounter. While we were slapped in the face and said that we do not deserve raises, in spite of all this, we remain professional and we will do our jobs. But no longer will the union leaders or our members stand quietly off to the side. It's time for action. I ask this board, actively get involved to help end this dispute now. Stop waiting for the agency recommendations. Urge them to accept the PEB, which will avert unnecessary job actions, will ultimately hurt us all in the end. The history of the MTA's unwillingness to honor third-party involvement in settling disputes has not turned out well. Mr. Chairman, board members, please, let's take these recommendations, move forward so that we can start working toward the future once again and get this agency back on track. Labor would like to get back to focus to what matters most, and I'm sure the MTA would as well. Let's provide a safe and reliable transportation for our riders. Thank you, and thank you for the extra time.
Thank you very much. James Snyder. James Snyder to be followed by Murray Bowden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, MTA board members. My name is James Snyder. I'm General Chairman of the Independent Railway Supervisors Association. I'm also a member of the Long Island Railroad Bargaining Coalition. Since our contracts expired, it has been the desire of our groups to obtain a fair contract for all of our members. As the process moved forward at what seemed to be a snail's pace, we reminded our members to remain patient and have faith in a collective bargaining process. Meeting after meeting without any success, we continued to remind our members of the process. We asked them to remain diligent at work and in their daily routines. With negotiations going nowhere, we asked the NMB to assign a mediator to help the process along. The assigned mediator, Mr. John Livingood, tried to move the process forward, time and time again without any success. After countless attempts to come together with the MTA on a contract, we realized we had exhausted our efforts. We then asked to be released and assigned to a PEB. PEB 244 was established, and beginning with a speech and a promise from Chairman Pendergrass, and I quote, "I will accept the board's recommendations," we felt confident that we were getting closer to a contract. After a week of presentations from both sides, a report was issued. Albeit not all labor had hoped for, we understood the process and felt the report was something we might be able to get to our members, come away with the ratification, and ultimately a deal. It now continues to frustrate our members to find that the MTA has declined these recommendations and has not even yet answered our requests to meet with us since the report was issued. The Long Island Railroad has endured superstorms with catastrophic setbacks, snowstorm after snowstorm, and event after event. And even after 4 years without a contract, our members continue to rise to the occasion time and time again, keeping the Long Island Railroad moving. It is with growing concern for the riding public, our members, and the region as a whole that I ask the board to push both sides towards the PEB 244 panel recommendations and ultimately a contract. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Murray Bowden, and then Benjamin Diamond.
It's his picture, not mine. My grandchildren are going to watch. I bring you greetings from Jim Simpson, who I met on this board in this room 18 years ago. He's now Commissioner of New Jersey DOT. He's chairman of New Jersey Transit. They're the people who run Metro North, west of Hudson. He's also chairman of the New Jersey Turnpike. I met with him yesterday to discuss some of those issues about road lines. Alan, I didn't want to stay at the meeting and get frustrated because nobody in B&T wants to discuss the issues. I sat with Jim, schmoozed, talk about those issues, the same issues facing B&T. He heard me. Arranged for me to meet with staff, which I will do after the Super Bowl, because I went over there and I realized Ronnie used to work here too, and she said he's a little busy. Chip's a little busy today, so I postponed it until after the Super Bowl because they're doing this job. Bridge and Tunnel has you flummoxed. They are breaking the law. My name is Murray Bowden. I live in Hartsdale, New York. This is for the record, and the picture is to prove that I was here and told the committee about what they're doing wrong. This is the George Washington Bridge incident where, you mean we didn't know about the traffic lanes? There are no such things as toll booths. They put up signs and wasted money on a Henry Hudson Park Bridge. They've removed the toll collectors. It's all electronic tolling. There is no place to have a sign that says Toll Plaza, because there is no such thing as a toll plaza. By the way, I got this hat from Jim Simpson. It was paid for by him personally and not by the state of New Jersey. Since people have taken a little extra time, I had what I was going to really talk about. Let's see.
A little extra time is fine.
Andrew Albert expired in 1/1/2010. He's a holdover. John Banks expired 6/30/11. He's a holdover. Bob Brickford expired 6/10/2010. He's a holdover. Jim Blair expired 1/1/10. Jim Blair. Jim, you said that you like to hear the train whistles at the station. That's your personal opinion. It's not relevant, and it happens to be wrong. The people who are using the manual are also using their personal opinions, and they happen to be wrong too. There are more people who are expired. Maybe these people who are holdovers should get off the board and let some young people who really know what's going on take care of business.
Could you wrap up? Thank you, Mr. Bowden. Benjamin Diamond.
Does he not know?
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Benjamin Diamond, and thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Benjamin Diamond, and I would like to speak regarding a service issue in the borough of Staten Island. There is a large service gap in the Graniteville section of Staten Island's North Shore, where many people must walk more than a half mile in order to access the nearest public bus routes. In addition, once they reach the nearest public bus routes, they are often forced to spend additional time reaching their destinations. This is because the current public bus routes in Graniteville are very indirect, and this neighborhood lacks direct east-west bus service. Now, I am aware that numerous other people and civic groups from the neighborhood have been advocating for said service gap to be filled. Unfortunately, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority keeps attempting to find reasons to maintain the status quo, only considering the negative aspects of plans that address the service gap without even so much as acknowledging the positive aspects of said plans. We are not asking for excessive service, only enough to bring all residents of Graniteville within a reasonable walking distance of a reasonably direct public bus route. There are other sections of the North Shore of Staten Island that have been heavily impacted by mass transit service cuts throughout the years, such as Westerly and Grimes Hill. As a matter of fact, as stated by the Metropolitan Transportation Authority in the 2010 Service Reductions booklet, Grimes Hill residents must walk 10 to 20 minutes to the nearest bus line, which is clearly beyond the walking distance guidelines. The proposal outlined by the community of Graniteville attempts to address all of these issues in a manner cost efficient to the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority recently acquired additional money and attempted to address sections of the City of New York where coverage was lost due to service cuts, as well as areas where new growth has created new demand and a need for mass transit service in those areas. All of the North Shore neighborhoods mentioned fall into at least one of these categories, and Graniteville in particular has seen growth in past decades to which the Metropolitan Transportation Authority has not responded. I implore you to objectively investigate the situation in the North Shore of Staten Island and maintain open lines of communication with the community of Graniteville in order to remedy said situation. You have our contact information, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diamond. That concludes the public comment period, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I have a few brief comments before we get into the full breadth of the meeting. First of all, I want to begin today with Howard Permit, who's here today after announcing his retirement last month. Howard's career spans the entire time that Metro-North has been an institution, a time in which the railroad improved service and doubled its ridership and got it to where it is today. He and I started our careers in Chicago a long time ago, and never did we think we'd end up in the same place in New York, but we certainly did. He rose through the ranks to eventually become Metro-North's president in 2008, where we oversaw the railroad's incredible expansion of service and ridership. Howard, on behalf of the entire MTA family, I want to wish you a great and well-deserved retirement, and thank you for the more than 30 years of service to Metro-North, MTA, Connecticut, and the state of New York. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, everybody. My pleasure.
Howard's successor, Joe Giletti, will start on February 10th, and in the period between when Howard leaves at the end of this week and the arrival of Joe Giletti, John Kesich will be acting president of Metro-North. I'd also like to say at this time that Alan Capelli and I had the privilege of attending the Hometown Heroes ceremony that the New York Daily News has, honoring the best of the best of the best that the Transit Authority has to offer in the form of employees. 16 employees were honored for exemplary duties and activities beyond what we expect of them on a daily basis. And when I say they're the best of the best of the best, I not only mean that for their sake, but there are countless other employees within the MTA family who we did not get a chance to acknowledge today in a formal ceremony, but we need to acknowledge them. The last comment I would like to make is, given the importance of safety in the system, given some of the discussions we had last month in December, primarily speaking about the Spite and Dival incident, but there were questions raised by board members in terms of how is safety handled at the agencies. In the next month's agenda, we will have our normal reports, as we always have in terms of operating reports, and we will have that information available, and be available for board members to ask any type of questions they want to ask, and we'll certainly deal with the procurements. But I've asked the agency heads to develop presentations with respect to the ongoing and active safety programs they have, so that you're aware of all that we do in the way of safety. We need to assure our customers on a daily basis that the service we provide is safe, reliable, and as on time as possible. That's the end of my comments. The minutes of December's meeting have been distributed to all. Are there any corrections or omissions? If not, do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Second. All in favor? Minutes are approved. Committee on Finance, Mr. Saul.
The Finance Committee met this month and reports the following. There are 3 action items this month. The first action item authorizes the entry into an insurance-linked security advisor contract and approves the panel selections for the roles of legal counsel, risk, modeler, and structuring agent for the ILS transactions. 2, the second action item approves the municipal finance disclosure policies and procedures. 3, the final action item authorizes the extension of the MTA's professional liability coverage for the owner-controlled insurance program for the East Side Access Project through December 31, 2019. The committee recommends these action items, and I move them.
Do I have a motion? Any discussion? All those in favor?
There are no procurement actions this month. There are 5 real estate action items which are described on pages 54-67 in the board book distributed for this meeting. The committee recommends these real estate items, and I move them.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Tom, that concludes the report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saul. The Transit and Bus Committee and its chairman, Mr. Fernando Ferrer.
Mr. Chairman, the Transit and Bus Committee met this month and reports the following. There is one action item this month. The action item approves the implementation of the B37 and the modification of the B70 and B8. The committee recommends this action item, and I move it.
Any discussion? Mr. Albert?
In light of the many customers of the soon-to-be restored, soon June anyway, B37, I would ask that Ops Planning just take a look at the route to see if there's a way, any way to extend it further into downtown Brooklyn, as so many of our customers have requested, whether it's in every other bus situation or a diversion of another route, or just something that gets these folks with a one-seat ride to downtown Brooklyn, because as you've heard from customer after customer, the 4th Avenue subway line, the R line, is not handicapped accessible, and the bus is. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Mr. Merdler?
Mr. Chairman, I would add only one thought to that which Mr. Albert correctly expressed, which is I would ask them to look at the possibility of alternating service to go to the full length of the route to Court Street between the 103 and the B37. Seems to me the people who are aged and infirm who use the B37 should be afforded the opportunity to getting to the courts, to the hospitals, to the center of Brooklyn without having to get off the bus and get onto another one. It's not right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merdler. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There are 9 procurement actions totaling $29.6 million. There's one non-competitive procurement for the MTA New York City Transit in the amount of $22.3 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. There are 4 competitive procurements for MTA New York City Transit in a total amount of $6.3 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
There are 4 ratifications for MTA New York City Transit in the total amount of $1 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the Transit and Bus Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Farrar. The Metro North Committee, chaired by Mr. Sador.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Metro North Committee met this month and reports the following. There are 6 procurement actions in a total amount of $36 million. There are 2 non-competitive procurements totaling $27.8 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Any discussion? Mr. Merdler?
Mr. Chairman, I would simply, rather than take too much time, ask that the record reflect the conversation that Governor Patterson and I had with Mr. Gardner concerning issues on MBWE, and to make sure that we start to implement the kind of things that Mr. Gardner suggested at that time, and that we do so promptly.
So noted. Any further discussion? Mr. Albert?
Just a question on the installation of bike racks on M8 cars. I assume this is going to be in places where people were standing prior to the installation, or what?
Yeah.
I'll let Howard answer the question.
Yeah, yes, Andrew, it's going to be, there's an area, seats, we're putting hooks on, we have models, this is a test, and if successful, then it could be.
Thank you.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. There are 3 competitive procurements in a total amount of $8.5 million. The committee
Aye.
There is 1 ratification in a total amount of $189,000. The committee recommends this ratification, and I move it.
Any questions? Discussion? All those in favor?
This concludes the report of the Metro North Railroad Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Sador. Mr. Pally, Long Island Committee.
Met this month, and I report the following. There are 4 procurement actions in the total amount of $876 million. There are no non-competitive procurements. There are 4 competitive procurements, 1 for Long Island Railroad and 3 for MTA Capital Construction, in the total amount of $876 million. The committee members who were present at the committee meeting considered and voted in favor of the procurements, although a committee quorum was not present at that time. I therefore move the board approve these 4 competitive procurements.
So moved. Seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. There are no ratification, and this concludes the report of the Long Island Railroad Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Pally. The chairman of the Bridges and Tunnels Committee, Mr. Capelli.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Bridges and Tunnels Committee, which is the oversight committee for bridges and tunnels. The employer of Jim MacGyver Fortunato, who was not honored today as a hometown hero, but is a hero to all of us here at the MTA. Omitted because not eligible because of the management position, but nonetheless as heroic. This committee met this month and report the following. There are 3 procurements in the total amount of $3.877 million. There are no non-competitive procurements. There is 1 competitive procurement in the total amount of $467,000. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
There are 2 ratifications in the total amount of $3.4 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
This concludes Bridges and Tunnels report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I would now like to go into executive session pursuant to Section 105(1)(e) of the New York State Public Officers Law for matters related to collective negotiations. May I have a motion? Second. All in favor? Aye. No questions? Who wants to be first?
I do.
Okay. I pointed to
Hi, Tom.
Alphonse.
Can you give us an update on where the MTA is as far as the decision on a second PEB for Long Island Railroad?
Let me just start with a preamble, because it's very important that we understand from this point forward what the situation is and what's going forward. With the exception of the 2 railroads, all of the other units within the MTA family come under the Taylor Law. The 2 railroads come under the Railway Labor Act, and that, as arcane and as structured it is the format we follow. So once the National Mediation Board released the parties and we went forward and had the first Presidential Emergency Board, we're following a process. And we've gotten the recommendations from the first Presidential Emergency Board, which we've stated, and I believe Anita Miller stated, is that we cannot accept them. And we cannot accept them because of the financial impact they have. We have time in the process to decide to ask for the PEB. The fact that we haven't formally asked for it doesn't mean we're not going to ask for it, but we're thinking through very carefully. If you understand something that I understand, that's why I don't want to preach, is that there is basically a 270-day time clock associated with this process, at the end of which, if the parties can't reach resolution, right of self-help comes in. So we want to be very careful and deliberative in any and all of the actions we take and think through them very carefully. So that is one of the issues that we're weighing very heavily, and we're in that process. And that's the best way for me to answer that question.
Tom,
Ted?
on East Side Access, in the documents that you put out, the estimates by MTACC, the consultants in the FTA, those are all a medium degree of mitigation of the schedule. So in other words, those are not the actual worst case scenario numbers. Do you know what the worst case scenario is for the FTA, for instance?
No, you'd have to ask them. But when you go into the issue of what degree of mediation is applied for both cost and schedule, there's an understanding that it's probably more likely than not you're going to have zero mitigation, nor you're going to have 100% mitigation. So some risks may be more likely to be mitigated, others less likely. So the path that a lot of people that are in these situations follow is that medium level of mitigation. And what we're doing with the range, if you heard the presentation, is, you know, this project has been around a long time. Its genesis actually was when I was president of the railroad back in the late 90s, mid-90s. And we haven't been really successful with pinning a date and a time. We need to get to that point, but this is the project that's 6 years out, and so we're dealing with a range. So one part of the range is a frank assessment of what maybe the worst cases are, but the best cases, and put a lot of pressure on the organization through the structural changes we made and the focus we made and some of the changes we made to manage to the low end.
Do you think that this, just to follow up on that, do you think that this project sends any messages about the other projects the MTA has done or will do in the future, in that it seems to be something that people got, you know, into with both feet years ago, long before anyone had any idea how long it was going to take and how much it was going to cost? I mean, is this a complete outlier for the MTA, or is it something that sends...
It's probably closer to a complete outlier and a standalone. The decision to create an MTA capital construction company was one that was not undertaken lightly. Prior to its existence, agencies managed their own projects. But with the formulation of East Side Access and a singular project over $1 billion, which had never ever been done before, I think the biggest project the Transit Authority had was the connection of the 63rd Street line to the Queens Boulevard subway, $700 to $800 million for 1,100 feet, was the only one that comes close. One of the things we tried to cover in the presentation at CPOC was the amount of earth that's moved. It's phenomenal amounts. If you take a look at historically in the subway system and New York City Transit, or since it's existed, or MTA since '68, at no time have we done that much mining or tunneling. No time. Have we done cut and cover construction? Have we done station? Have we done systems installation, replaced track? Absolutely. But this is a one-off in terms of its scope and its complexity.
The MTA Police Union just approved a contract of a 17% raise, I think it was, over 7 years. So the other transit unions are saying that this was not a net zero contract. Is that accurate? And if not, if it wasn't net zero, then is the money coming from a different place, or how
it is net zeros. I mean, part of the responsibility, I serve in two capacities. I'm a chairman, which means I'm a board member, and I'm the CEO of the MTA. And as a board member, we have fiduciary responsibilities to make sure that the decisions we're taking are consistent with the financial plan and the known resources we have coming in. People can make characterizations however they want. If they've seen the details, they can still make them. If they haven't seen the details, how can they make them? But in answer to your question, are there 3 net zeros? The answer is yes, and that was part of the dialogue we had with the board.
Okay, and I understand it was partially retroactive going back to 2011, is that?
It starts in 2011. I believe it's a 7-year term, Anita. So, yes. And that's the other thing that's out there. I mean, we've got a number of outstanding collective bargaining agreements, and they all have different terms. You know, the TW, the infamous 443, and we're closing out those. The railroads have different time frames. And a lot of times when you ask, people ask questions, it's important that we line those up, because they don't all line up exactly right. Matt?
On East Side Access, you had a board member ask yesterday, or on Monday rather, whether this project was worth continuing. Do you think there is some regret within the authority, within the board, about having done this in the first place?
No, I mean, no. And the reason I say that is that if you remember my answer, Mr. Merdler asked the question. When the MTA was created in '68, the issue of a terminal for the Long Island Railroad, Metro North may have been a pregnant thought in somebody's mind, but it was a Conrail operation back then. It wasn't what it is today, and it certainly wasn't the largest or second largest commuter railroad in the country. It was all about Long Island coming into Manhattan, and the idea then was a terminal at 3rd Avenue. But then it morphed to, you know, a terminal probably at Grand Central, and they made a decision to sink 4-track tunnels, 2 over 2 into 63rd Street, at 63rd Street and the East River, 1 level for the Transit Authority, 1 level for Long Island Railroad. The utility of the project is very clear. The transformational change it will make for Long Islanders commuting into New York will be very clear. We anticipate upwards of 60% of the existing Long Island Railroad customers want an East End access. That number may fluctuate, but it's at least that high. From a transformational change in terms of benefit to the Long Island Railroad, it's definitely supportable. It also provides an ability, as capacity gets freed up, to have Metro North come into to the west side to Penn Station, not only for service reasons in terms of choice of destination, but for resiliency reasons. Right now, Long Island has 3 terminals. It's got Flatbush, it's got Long Island City, it's got Penn Station. Metro North has 1. It's got Grand Central. And if the Harlem River Lift Bridge went out, you know, we'd find ourselves in a position we wouldn't have resiliency. So the project, as we've described that one, is a combination of service alternatives and functionality, as well as resiliency.
Tom, a record number of us are riding the buses and the trains every year. We've also seen a record number of problems, it seems, and big ones, one after the other. What do you think is going wrong?
I think the problems have been more pronounced in one agency than others. I mean, I think that's a fair statement. There's no doubt about it. Once you're carrying 5.6 million people a day on the subway system, and we had a record day on October 24th, 5.9 million, any delay that occurs will affect more people, and it's more pronounced. So it's not lost on the management hierarchy and the executive leadership of the agencies of how important it is to manage to that minute level. And we need to do that, because whenever you improve your performance, the floor gets established at a higher level, Greg, so you need to continue more.
So there isn't a managerial focus, or there needs to be more of an operational focus, some have suggested? Is there a problem within the structure of the MTA in your mind?
Well, certainly not. Let's separate the two out in terms of Metro North versus the other agencies. There are certain questions that are being asked. You can't have the number of incidents that have occurred at Metro North in the last year without asking some basic questions about what's going on. And there have been public dialogue about that. The FRA is doing a deep dive about that. But with respect to the other agencies, nowhere near. But that doesn't mean the other agencies aren't paying attention to that. Because when incidents occur, I mean, in the normal day of doing business, whether or not it's reported by the media, if an incident occurs that affects tens of thousands of people during the rush hour, I guarantee you the next day that's being reviewed to a detailed level by that particular agency. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? What do we need to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? Pete?
Could you explain the governor's role when it came to signing the tentative agreement with the police unions? Is that something that has to be, the details of which are floated by the second floor before you can strike such a deal, or is it something that, you know, because the governor says he set this pattern about the 3 zeros, how involved is his administration in that, or is it something that you inform them of after the fact?
I'm not going to go into the details of the relationship. We're a public authority. We're not an agency within the New York State government. And as a public authority, there's a governance structure that we must follow and the board must follow in terms of carrying out its duties. To say that that's not done in a vacuum, to say that that's done with an open dialogue with people is a fair statement, but the actions of the board and how a public authority operates are pretty clear in terms of the governance structure of the Port Authority, MTA and all of its agencies, the Thruway Authority. It's the best way for me to answer the question.
I was wondering if for going back to East Side Access, is working around the Herald interlocking, is that the biggest challenge for the construction?
There are numerous challenges. The fact that and we're past the difficult mining and tunneling portions, but the fact that you don't have a lot of locations of vertical access along something that's being constructed is difficult. The fact that you have sequenced work that has to occur in a certain sequence, and if it's delayed, you forestall the ability of other people to work. There's a number of challenges. Herald is one of those, for sure, but not the only challenge by far.
Tom, you've got a couple unions on the LIRR already using the S word, strike. If it comes to that, possibly as soon as March, how much of an impact would that have on city transit?
Well, first of all, we're doing everything we can to avoid the right of self-help, which is the end result of the Railway Labor Act process. That's the first and foremost. And that includes what can we do to get to a point of getting an agreed deal with the collective bargaining units involved. But ultimately, if we reach the point where that's not done, that's why I talked about that 270-day clock that you can't stop. You'd have to act the Congress to stop it, and that's generally not done. That you have to be prepared for what might be the eventuality of some type of right of self-help that either party could take. I have a memory for some reason with Long Island Railroad, because the last time they struck in 1994, I was Senior Vice President of Operations at New York City Subway, and I was assigned the responsibility, along with 2 other people, to develop a strike plan in the event the strike would occur, and a strike did occur. Actually, Helene was part of that team. So we have to be prepared if that were to occur. Much the same way for an act of God or a weather activity where you hope to God a hurricane doesn't come again, but you have to be prepared for it. You have to have a plan ready to go into place, but only if all other means fail to result in a collective bargaining agreed deal.
With the Super Bowl coming up, what is the MTA doing to ensure that the subways can handle the expected crowds of people to get to Penn Station and to link up with New Jersey Transit so they have a reliable way to get there, considering the unique location of the game?
Well, first of all, we've been involved in all of the planning leading up to the event. You know, you've heard the NFL and the host committee talk about this fact. This is a public transportation related Super Bowl event. The choice of the venue for the week activities on Broadway couldn't be better located for us in terms of the infrastructure that we have in place, so we don't have to bring transportation. A lot of it's there. When you take a look at the events that we handle pretty much on a year in, year out basis and the large size volume of them, I'll give you a couple examples. Macy's fireworks is like unbelievable, like over 1 million people descend on the subway in less than an hour. The Thanksgiving Day parade, Macy's parade, it's the same thing. And I believe those numbers make the Super Bowl numbers pale in comparison. But we will have staff on hand to be able to deal with people. We will have service strategies ready. The Port Authority is doing its thing in terms of making sure that the tunnels are ready to accommodate the buses. So a lot of effort's been going into this because we want to make sure we do it right.
Have you met with the new leadership? I'm back here. The new leadership at New York City Department of Transportation, and what is the MTA's working relationship like with DOT on projects like expanding bus rapid transit?
SBS, as we call it. We've got an excellent relationship. It has been excellent over the past 12 years with the past administration. We see no reason why that it won't continue that way with the de Blasio administration. The new commissioner of the Department of Transportation is someone a lot of us know, have a lot of respect for, Polly Trottenberg. We see no reason why the relationship will not even improve over time. And you always want a relationship to improve. What we want to do with SBS is pretty much fully in line with what they want to do. I think one of the challenges we're going to have is where do we get the funds to be able to do it jointly or collectively. But if you take a look at where we need to provide better, more frequent service on the bus side, SBS is a solution to that. So I'd say the relationship is excellent, and we're going to move forward. Polly just started, I believe, in the last week, and we'll continue it.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Said they did.